Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Some background about me. I rely on a wheelchair due to a condition called postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, or POTS for short. It causes me to faint when I stand up too quickly or stay upright for too long. On good days, I can walk short distances, but I need my wheelchair for most daily activities, especially after work when my energy is drained. My apartment complex has designated handicap parking spots, but the real issue has been the sidewalk access to my unit. There's a clearly marked fire lanes with no parking signs posted everywhere, but one particular resident had been ignoring them for months. The day everything went down started like any other. I came home from work exhausted, only to find a beat-up sedan parked directly under one of the no parking fire lane signs and halfway onto the sidewalk. This completely blocked the only wheelchair accessible route to my apartment. I was beyond frustrated. This had been happening repeatedly, and my landlord had instructed me to document it whenever it occurred. So I started taking photos of the car with my phone. That's when she came storming out of her apartment. She started yelling at me, demanding to know what I was doing and ordering me to stop taking pictures of her car. Her voice was loud enough to draw attention from nearby apartments. I tried to stay calm. I lowered my phone and explained that she was parked in a fire lane and blocking the sidewalk. I told her I couldn't get to my apartment in my wheelchair because of how she'd parked. She responded with complete indifference about my wheelchair needs, declaring she would park wherever she wanted. She demanded I delete the photos immediately, her voice getting even louder. I decided the best course of action was to just go inside. I had to leave my wheelchair in my car and walk the short distance to my door, which was difficult and risky with my condition. As I turned to leave, she got right in my face. She told me not to ignore her and demanded I give her my phone. Her tone was threatening, and I could see the anger in her eyes. She lunged toward me, trying to grab my phone. Out of reflex, I put my hands up and shoved her back. That's when everything escalated. She grabbed me by the throat with her long acrylic nails and started punching me repeatedly. I tried to defend myself, but I could feel myself getting lightheaded, a warning sign that I might faint. Thankfully, my roommate and some neighbors were having a smoke break nearby and heard the commotion. They came running over and pulled her off me. My roommate shouted at the woman, asking what was wrong with her and telling her to get away from me. He was clearly shocked by what he was witnessing. The woman immediately claimed I had assaulted her first, pointing out that I had pushed her. She tried to make herself sound like the victim. One of my neighbors quickly contradicted her, saying they had seen everything. The neighbor explained they had watched her attack me just for taking pictures of her illegally parked car. Someone called the police and paramedics showed up shortly after. My neck was bleeding from where her nails had dug in, and while the paramedics were checking me out, I had a syncope episode. I fainted due to my POTS condition being triggered by the stress and exertion. The paramedics took me to the emergency room where I received treatment for the cuts on my neck and monitoring for my fainting episode. While there, I decided I wanted to press charges. This wasn't just about parking anymore. This woman had physically assaulted me. When I spoke with the police, I mentioned that I knew she had a gun displayed on her wall. I also knew she was a convicted felon, which meant she shouldn't legally possess firearms. I suggested they might want to time her arrest for when she was home. What happened next was beyond anything I expected. The police went to arrest her for the assault and discovered a treasure trove of criminal activity. The car she'd been parking in the fire lane was stolen. She didn't have insurance or even a driver's license. Inside her apartment, they found used needles scattered all over, with her 8-year-old child present. And as I suspected, there was a gun on the wall, which turned out to be stolen as well. Child Protective Services removed her child from the home immediately. The woman was arrested and held without bond. 2 days ago, the district attorney called me with an update. Apparently, the woman had instructed her child to record our confrontation, thinking it would show me assaulting her. Instead, the video clearly showed her attacking me unprovoked. Combined with her 7 prior assault charges over the past 5 years, the evidence was overwhelming. The DA explained that, had they only arrested her for the assault, she likely would have received probation because she was a parent. But because of all the additional charges, possession of a stolen vehicle, driving without a license, drug possession, child endangerment, illegal possession of a firearm by a felon, and possession of a stolen firearm, she's looking at around 30 years in prison, maybe more depending on what the state decides to charge her with for the drugs. She lost her child, her home, her car, and now her freedom, all because she couldn't be bothered to park legally and decided to assault someone documenting her violation. The district attorney thanked me for the tip about the gun. Without that information, they might not have discovered the extent of her criminal activities, and her child might still be living in that dangerous environment. I never wanted things to escalate this far, but I'm relieved that both her child and the rest of the apartment complex are safer now, and I can finally use the sidewalk to access my apartment without obstruction. I was 6 months pregnant, and my husband and I were beyond excited. My husband had become extremely protective since we found out, attending every doctor's appointment, reading every pregnancy book, and even taking paternity leave early to make sure I was never alone during the final trimester. That day, we were at a department store in the baby section. My husband had stepped away to look at cribs while I browsed through tiny onesies and footy pajamas. I was holding up a little yellow outfit when I felt someone standing uncomfortably close behind me. I politely asked the person behind me if I could have some space. When I turned around, I saw an older woman, probably in her 50s, staring intensely at my baby bump. Instead of backing up, she moved even closer. The woman asked me how old I was in a calculating tone that wasn't friendly at all. I was 28, but I've always looked younger than my age. People often mistake me for a college student. I told her I was an adult and requested some personal space again. She responded by saying I couldn't be older than 17 and commented that it was a shame to ruin my life so young. I was shocked by her rudeness but tried to remain calm. I told her that my age was none of her business and asked her to leave me alone. She reached out and actually touched my stomach without permission. I stepped back, hitting the clothing rack behind me. The woman then explained that she had been trying to adopt for years. She complained about the system being broken and how good Christian homes were being overlooked while children were born to teenagers who couldn't possibly raise them properly. I told her not to touch me again and clarified that I was not a teenager and that this baby was very much wanted. She then proposed what she called a solution. She described herself as financially stable with a big house. She claimed she could give my child everything I couldn't and suggested we make a private arrangement, even offering to pay my medical bills. It took me a moment to process what she was suggesting. I asked her incredulously if she was seriously asking me to give her my baby. The woman insisted it was the responsible thing to do. She said I was clearly too young and should be enjoying my youth instead of changing diapers. She framed it as offering me a way out of a mistake. I felt my heart racing and protective instincts kicking in. I wrapped my arms around my belly and told her this was not a mistake but my child. I warned her to back off before I called security. Her face changed completely. The fake sweetness vanished, replaced by something hard and angry. She called me a selfish little girl and claimed I would ruin the baby's life because I was too proud to admit I made a mistake. She was yelling now, attracting attention from other shoppers. I tried to walk away, but she grabbed my arm. I demanded she let go of me immediately. She refused, insisting I needed to listen to reason. She declared that she deserved the baby more than I did. I wrenched my arm away and pulled out my phone, warning her to stop her nonsense and leave before I called the police. What happened next was so fast. She lunged forward with both hands outstretched toward my neck. I felt her fingers press against my throat as I stumbled backward. I couldn't believe that a stranger was trying to strangle me in the middle of a department store. Suddenly, she was gone. My husband had appeared out of nowhere and shoved her away from me. She fell to the floor looking surprised that someone had intervened. My husband shouted at her not to touch his wife. He moved to stand protectively in front of me, checking if I was okay. The woman scrambled to her feet. She grabbed a heavy glass baby bottle from a nearby display and charged at my husband, swinging it like a weapon. My husband has a black belt in Taekwondo. He easily sidestepped her attack, grabbed her wrist, and with one swift movement, used her own momentum to flip her onto the floor. She hit the ground hard and didn't get up again, knocked out cold. Store security arrived within minutes, followed by police. There were plenty of witnesses and security footage that clearly showed she had assaulted me first and then attacked my husband with a weapon. It was ruled self-defense, but we decided to press charges for assault and attempted kidnapping. We later found out she had approached other pregnant women in the past with similar offers. She wasn't even approved to adopt through legal channels due to psychological evaluations that raised red flags. My husband and I welcomed our healthy baby girl 2 months later, and I'm just grateful that my husband was there that day and that our little family is safe. I'm 27 years old, working as a software developer at a tech company in Amsterdam. My job is pretty demanding, so I cherish my weekends, but this particular Thursday, I had to work late because we were launching a new application the following Monday. It was around 8 p.m. when I finally left the office. I was exhausted and just wanted to get home, make a quick dinner, and collapse on my couch. The metro station was about a 10-minute walk from my office, and I was trudging along, earbuds in, listening to my favorite podcast. When I approached the entrance to the metro station, I noticed something odd. A short woman with an expensive-looking handbag was following closely behind a man who looked increasingly uncomfortable. He kept looking back at her with an annoyed expression. I removed one earbud, curious about what was happening. The man suddenly stopped and turned around to face her. He confronted her, asking what was wrong with her and pointing out that she had been following him since they were in the Albert Heijn supermarket. The woman responded by yelling indignantly, demanding to know if he was aware of who she was. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the exhaustion from work, or maybe I just felt bad for the guy, but before I could stop myself, I jumped into the conversation. I suggested that perhaps she should tell us who she was, since she seemed so intent on making it known. At that moment, I knew I might have messed up. Both of them turned to look at me. The man seemed surprised but somewhat relieved, while the woman's face filled with rage. The woman yelled back at me in an insulted tone. She declared that her husband was Peter Van Houten, apparently a famous accountant at Deloitte. She said this as if we were supposed to be impressed by this information. I had already committed to this interaction, so there was no backing out now. I pointed out that she had only told us who her husband was, not who she herself was. The woman's eyes widened as if she couldn't believe I had the audacity to question her identity separate from her husband's. She started boasting about how her husband had received a promotion the previous month for securing the Philips account. I interrupted her, clarifying that she was still only telling us about her husband's accomplishments. I asked her directly who she was and what important things she had done personally. The man, who had been watching our exchange with growing amusement, now encouraged her to answer my question, calling her a wappie, the Dutch equivalent of a Karen. The woman's face turned red with embarrassment or anger, probably both. She tried to speak but couldn't form a coherent response. She was stammering, clearly unable to come up with anything meaningful. I pressed further, asking if it could be that she hadn't done anything important herself. The woman defensively asked for a moment to think. She actually stood there, finger on her chin, trying to come up with something, anything, that would validate her sense of importance. As the seconds ticked by, her face slowly turned from red to pale. The realization seemed to be sinking in that she had been living vicariously through her husband's achievements. After about 30 seconds of uncomfortable silence, I repeated my question, asking who she was and what important thing she had done. Without saying another word, the woman turned and walked away, her face as pale as a ghost. She looked like she was having some kind of existential crisis. Once she was out of earshot, I apologized to the man for interfering in his situation, explaining that I don't usually get involved in these kinds of confrontations. The man assured me it was fine and thanked me for my help. He explained that the woman had been following him since the supermarket, insisting that he must know who she was because they had supposedly met at some corporate event. He told me he had repeatedly told her that he didn't remember her, which she had taken as a personal insult. I asked if he worked with her husband, wondering about the connection. He replied that he had never even heard of her husband and speculated that she had simply seen him in a suit and assumed he must be part of their social circle. We both laughed at the absurdity of the situation. He commented that I had asked her a good question, one that he believed no one had ever posed to her before. I hope that moment made her reflect on her life and perhaps find something meaningful to do with it, something that would give her a real answer the next time someone asks her who she is. I had been looking forward to this trip for months. Disney holds a special place in my heart. The last time I visited was when I was 9 years old with my parents. Those memories of wide-eyed wonder and excitement had stayed with me for over 15 years. Now, as an adult with a decent job as an accountant and finally having some vacation time saved up, I decided to revisit the place that had given me so much joy as a child. My friend and I had planned this trip meticulously. We both took a week off work, split the hotel costs, and created a detailed itinerary of all the rides and attractions we wanted to experience. Neither of us had significant others at the moment, which made the planning easier. Just two friends looking to relive some childhood nostalgia. The first day at the park was magical but exhausting. The lines were much longer than I remembered, though as a child I probably didn't notice the wait times as much since everything was new and exciting. By mid-afternoon, my friend and I discovered something we hadn't known about: single rider lanes. These lines moved much faster because they were used to fill empty seats on rides when groups didn't fill all the spots. Since we didn't mind riding separately, this seemed like a perfect solution to maximize our time. We were waiting in one such single rider line for about 20 minutes when I noticed something odd. A family of four, a mother and two daughters around 10 to 12 years old, followed by their father, started walking through the middle of the line holding hands in a chain. They weren't just cutting in front of one or two people, they were bypassing at least 50 people who had been waiting patiently. Several people around us started murmuring and questioning what was happening. One random visitor asked the family what they were doing. The mother claimed they had forgotten something on the ride and needed to get it back. The woman's tone didn't sound genuine. And what could they possibly have forgotten that would require the entire family to retrieve? The family pushed forward until they reached the area where single riders, fast pass riders, and regular line riders all converged. That's when a woman behind me lost her patience. She yelled loudly, demanding to know what exactly they had forgotten. The mother ignored her completely, continuing to usher her daughters forward. By this point, everyone in the single rider lane was fuming. We all realized what was happening. She was simply using the forgotten item excuse to skip the entire line. We all started talking amongst ourselves as we inched forward. I expressed my disbelief at their behavior, while my friend commented on how unfair it was to everyone who had been waiting. Another visitor remarked that some people think rules don't apply to them. When my friend and I finally made it to the pre-ride movie area, I spotted a staff member and decided to say something. I approached him and described the woman and her daughters, explaining how they had cut through the entire line with a false excuse. The staff member told me that since they were already in line to board the ride, there wasn't much he could do. I was disappointed but understood his position. However, when we made it to the car boarding line, there they were again, the mother and her two daughters. I spotted another employee and tried once more. I explained that the family had cut through the entire single rider line by lying about forgetting something, and that everyone in line had witnessed it. The employee nodded and said she would let someone know, but she walked in the opposite direction of the ride operators, and I suspected nothing would be done. Then something interesting happened. One of the daughters ran up to a man standing directly behind my friend and me. She tugged on his arm and told him to come with them, calling him Dad. We turned around to see their father, who had been separated from them in the chaos, but instead of joining his family, he refused to move forward. He kept letting people go in front of him, head hanging low. It was clear he was embarrassed by what his family had done. The entire line started speaking louder, intentionally making sure the family could hear our disapproval. Someone in line commented on what a terrible example they were setting for their children. Another person questioned why they thought they were so special when everyone else had been waiting for hours. A third person criticized them for lying just to get what they wanted. The father continued to hang back, seemingly wanting no part of the situation his family had created. Meanwhile, the mother and daughters were inching closer to the front of the line. That's when I'd had enough. I turned to the people in front of me and asked if they would mind if I went to let the ride operators know what happened, expressing my determination not to let the family get away with their behavior. They happily stepped aside, allowing me to move forward. The mother was blocking the walkway since they were next to board. I tapped her on her side and politely asked her to move, staring her down until she reluctantly moved aside. Then I approached the ride operator. I explained to the operator that the woman and her children had cut the entire line through the single rider section by falsely claiming they had forgotten something and suggested that anyone in line could verify my story. The mother gave me the most evil, disgusted, shocked glare I've ever seen. I walked back to my friend, and another woman stepped forward to verify my story. She confirmed to the operator that everything I had just said was true and that everyone had witnessed it. The mother started loudly protesting, claiming that we were both lying and that they hadn't cut the line at all. That's when the entire line erupted. Everyone started shouting the same story, determined not to let this family get away with their scheme. The ride operators finally understood the situation and called for a supervisor. The supervisor asked the mother and her children to come with him. The mother complained that the situation was ridiculous and denied any wrongdoing. The supervisor responded that they had multiple witnesses saying otherwise. The family was escorted out through a side door while the father stood back, still hanging his head in shame. As they disappeared from view, everyone in line broke into applause. The father quietly slipped out of line and followed after his family. The ride operators thanked me for speaking up, and they let my friend and I get on the next available car. The rest of our day at Disney was fantastic, and we lived with a story neither of us would ever forget. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.